Koine, and welcome to Parsing John. Today we are in Chapter 1, Verse 48, about to finish off this page. This is the rubric, everything that we're looking for as we go through this text. Let's go ahead and get started. Just scooch this up a bit. Alright, I believe that's good enough. Our Greek. Legei autoi Nathanael pothen me genoskes. Apekrise Jesus kai epen autoi protuse Philippon Phonesai unto hupotain sukain edonse. And that's as far as we're going to go today. At the very beginning of this verse, we find our verb, which is very nice and good for us poor English speakers. However, this is unusual for classical languages, at least for native Greek and native Roman speakers. As far as I understand it, they tended to normally put the verbs at the end of the sentences to act as periods and the subjects at the beginning of sentences to introduce the new sentences. That's normally how we would see it, but of course, the way that since these are inflected languages, that isn't at all how they have to operate. Now, lege, which we have seen a zillion times before, like right there, it's pretty easy. I'm not going to parse it again since we've already got it up there. I'm just going to put the translation. Says, and autoi, we've also seen autoi before. That's right there. Again, dative singular masculine, so I'm not going to translate that either. Parse, that is. No need to do too much extra work. To him. Since we had Jesus, where did he go? Where did Jesus go? There we go. Since Jesus is the one who's speaking in the previous verse, he's probably going to be the referent of this relative pronoun, not relative, demonstrative pronoun right here. And Nathaniel looks like he's going to be the subject. If you recall, Nathaniel is indeclinable. Okay, and since we've got this right here, it looks like this is the end of the direct statement right there. So I'm going to close off the quote marks. Nathaniel says to him, direct statement right here. Pothen is an adverb, and it means from where, or if you prefer the older English, whence. One should always go with this word rather than from where. From where is boring. Genoskes is our verb. We've got epsilon iota sigma here. That's going to be second person singular present tense. Gnosko. This sigma kappa here tell us that. It's also the first principal part. Active, indicative. Since we've got a semicolon here, we know this is a question. So I'm going to phrase it as a question. Do you know? Question mark. Me comes from ego. Emu, emoi, eme, if you want the emphatic forms, it's just mu, moi, me for the unemphatic forms. Accusative, singular, unemphatic. I didn't technically need to write that. Me. Whence do you know me? End quote. And then we have Jesus, which is in its nominative, singular, masculine form. And our verb is apekrithe. Apekrithe, I believe we've seen on the previous page a few times. This theta eta here is our third person singular form. It is built off of the aorist passive stem, but this is a deponent verb anyway. Apokrinomai, I believe, is the first principal part. So it's aorist deponent, doesn't have a passive meaning. Instead, it has an active meaning in the way that we translate it. Indicative. Kai is a conjunction just meaning and, as it has always before now. So I think once it may have meant even or also. Could be wrong. Apen is our next verb. Epsilon nu there is our third person singular. And this is lego ero epon. So aorist tense. Active and indicative. Said. Autoi. Same thing we've seen before, so I'm just going to pull this one down. To him. This one being Nathaniel, though, is the referent. It looks like we're entering direct discourse here. Pro is a preposition, and to is clearly genitive. So pro plus the genitive in this case, and that's going to mean before, singular, and it could be masculine or neuter. Until we find its noun, we can't be certain about that. The se is going to be accusative singular, and it is, of course, second person. You. Head, we got Philippon. Omicron nu is the ending there, so that's accusative singular masculine. And then coming on ahead, we've got phonesai, and we still haven't found our noun. And right away, this should be a red flag for us. Article, no noun. Philip's the wrong case. Say is the wrong case. Why would you even have an article with say? And then we've got phonesai. Now let's take a look. Before we address that red flag, we'll get back to it in a moment. Let's look at the form of phonesai and ask ourselves, what is that? I'm going to move this up here. We don't need the beginning of the verse. Phonesai, we have two different options for this. Sai could be the third person singular aorist, because phones, and then my brain just went blank, active optative form. And now, right there, we should pause yet again and think, what version of Greek are we dealing with here in the book of John? We're not dealing with Doric. We're not dealing with Ionic. We're not dealing with Attic. We have Koine Greek. And what you should know from Koine Greek is the optative is a voice. Is it voice? Mood. It's a mood. Is a mood that Koine does not use very often at all. So for this to be optative would be highly unlikely. So we need to look for any other options for this form. Could it be anything else at all? And it turns out, yes, it can. Sai could also be the aorist, active, infinitive. So either aorist, active, infinitive, or third person singular aorist, active, optative. The infinitive is far more likely. And the reason behind that is all the way back here with to. Whenever you find an article and it doesn't have a noun to point to, either it is actually pretending to be a preposition, which happens quite frequently, or if there's an infinitive, what we actually have got going on here is an articular infinitive. I have to say, articular infinitives are one of the most frustrating things ever to try to understand. And this was in my third semester of Greek. Third semester of Greek, roughly equivalent to the fourth. We had a very rushed course in the summer. These things are just annoying at first, until you understand that they are actually equivalent to the Latin gerund or even just the English gerund. Phonesai, then, we wouldn't really translate as an infinitive. Instead, we translate it based on the case of its article and what's going on there. To is the object of pro, which means that phonesai is also the object of pro. If you recall, infinitives are actually verbal nouns. And this means call. And now, as a gerund in English, we'd want to translate it as calling. And we could do it that way. We could say calling, or be having called, something along those lines. So, other option to treat it as a gerund. And then our prepositional phrase naturally ends right here, as does our articular infinitive. I'm going to do curly brackets. Before the calling, and we would say of Philip, or before Philip called. So just very, to us English speakers, a strange way of doing it, in order to make the verb a noun so that it can be the object of the preposition pro. Very strange and interesting. But there we go. Seemingly complex, and for a poor English speaker like me, definitely, but not really. Before Philip called you, And now we can move on out of this. Onta is a very strange looking word at first, but then you need to remember that it's from eimi. It is actually the present active participle. And this one is going to be accusative, singular, masculine. With se as its referent. Being. Hupotain sukain adon. Adon is the wrong form to be part of this prepositional phrase. Hupo here is clearly taking the accusative. Tain sukain. It's feminine in form. Hupo, when it's taking the accusative, means under. The fig tree. There we go. Being under the fig tree. Oh, and actually technically onta could be taken this say rather than that say as it's referred. Moving on. Adon, hora ol opsomai adon, so first person singular. Aorist, active, indicative. So second aorist. I saw. Say, same form as right here, so I'm going to pull that down again. Accusative direct object. And there we go. That is the entirety of verse 48. Let's take a look at it in its own context. Nathanael says to him being Jesus, "Whence do you know me?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you," or before the calling of Philip, you, being under the fig tree, I saw you. Or I saw you being under the fig tree. Kind of rocky sounding in English, but there we go. That is verse 48. Now we want to take a look at it in its greater context from verse 43. Pull that down so you can actually see it. On the next day, he wished to have gone into the Galilee, and he finds Philip, and he says, and Jesus, says to him, I'm going to cross that out so it quits stomping over it. Follow me. And the Philip was from Bethsaida, from the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip finds, I'm going to cross this one out too, the Nathanael, and he says to him, what Moses wrote in the law, and we would say again, what the prophets wrote, we have found Jesus, son of the Joseph, the one from Nazareth. And Nathanael said to him, is it possible that anything from Nazareth is good? Or the other way of translating it, as you may have noticed in the note from the last, when we went over this, is anything able to be good from Nazareth? Either way is possible. Dunatai, since it normally wants to take an infinitive as its object, I was incorrect to say the an indirect statement as being the most likely. It's the other way around. It's more probable. Philip says to him, come and see, or come and know. The Jesus saw the Nathanael coming toward him, and says concerning him, see, truly Israelite, in whom is not deceit. Nathanael says to him, whence do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, I saw you being under the fig tree. And that's as far as we made it. Now, the very last thing that we need to do with this verse is we need to take a look at it and see, are there any proper nouns without article, definite articles? Our very first one is Nathanael, and every previous time we've seen Nathanael without an article, we definitely don't want an indefinite article with him. Just the name alone is fine. Let's see how it looks here. A Nathanael says to him, or Nathanael says to him. A Nathanael, as I said previously with, well, whichever one it was, doesn't work. Because we've only got one Nathanael. There's only one Nathanael coming and seeing. It destroys the meaning of the text to imply that there's another Nathanael out there in English. Bad idea. No indefinite article. Still. Jesus, no article here for Jesus, so we want to take a look which one makes more sense. Jesus answered and said to him, or a Jesus answered and said to him. And that, from the context of everything that's come before, is also nonsense. A Jesus, well, we were talking about a very specific Jesus beforehand, the one that Nathanael expressly came here to see or to know, as is the other option. Indefinite article does not work here either. Philip doesn't have an article, even though his infinitive does. So we have to treat it the same way. Before a Philip called you, or before Philip called you. Now, just as everything else before this, we have context and we know it is a very definite Philip we're talking about. Therefore, an indefinite article makes zero sense at all. No other proper nouns in here, and that means we are done with verse 48. Thank you very much for putting up with me and joining me in this text. I hope taking a look at it has been helpful for you, and I hope that you continue to join me. Have a good day.